I told her what I missed. Not all at once, just in the quiet, late-night way we used to talk, when the house was still and her hand would find mine beneath the sheets. I said I missed the way she used to lean into me, not just for comfort but with want. That I felt like a fixture now, reliable, quiet, unnoticed. She didn't look up from her phone. Maybe stop needing so much. It's not that deep. No anger in her voice. That would have been easier. It was worse than that. A throwaway joke, one she didn't expect me to take seriously. She laughed softly to herself, not cruelly. Just like I was being dramatic. Like this wasn't about us. I remember the way the light from her screen lit up her face. Blank, mildly amused. As if I'd told her I wanted to start a pottery class, not that I was drowning in the absence of something I didn't know how to ask for anymore. That night, something didn't break. That would imply it could be fixed. No, something shut off. Not love. Not even desire. It was permission. The quiet green light I'd always given myself to believe her jokes were just jokes. That I was overthinking it. That she cared but didn't know how to show it. I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling. She rolled onto her side, facing away from me, not noticing that I hadn't touched her. Not noticing anything. The next morning, everything looked the same. She asked if I'd pick up oat milk on the way home. Sent me a reel about a couple doing some corny dance challenge. Texted, "Love you," out of habit. And I answered all of it. On time. Smiling emoji included. Because that's how it starts. You smile through the ache while you try to tell if it's something that will pass, or something that's already changed you. But that moment, that laugh, it stayed. Echoed. Days passed, then weeks. One night we argued, something petty. And 2 hours later, she was suddenly in the mood. Like a switch flipped. Like my frustration unlocked some box she kept closed unless she wanted something. I noticed it again the next time. And the next. Always after a disagreement. Never random. Never her idea. Then one evening, we were with friends. She poured wine, sat back, and said, "He gets so sensitive when I'm not in the mood. Like it's personal or something." They laughed. I did too, quietly, politely. But something cold settled in me. That was the last time I tried. Once I stopped trying, everything got quiet. Not between us. She still sent the same texts, made the same dinner small talk, tagged me in couples memes like we were still in on something together. But inside, where there used to be tension, there was just space. A cold curiosity. I started watching. Not in the desperate, obsessive way that eats a man alive. No. I watched like a scientist who already suspects the answer and is just collecting proof for the report. It became painfully simple. She never initiated closeness. Not once. Not even by accident. Every gesture of affection had a precursor, a tiff, a disagreement, a moment where I pulled back. Then suddenly, she'd lean in, smile a little wider, place her hand on my thigh like she used to years ago. Transactional wasn't the word. Strategic was closer. If I showed distance, she offered warmth. Not too much. Just enough to keep the gears moving. But the second I responded, softened, leaned in, she drifted again. No cruelty. Just disinterest wrapped in routine. Once I came home early with her favorite food. No occasion. Just felt like doing something thoughtful. She barely looked up, murmured, "Thanks," and didn't even pause her podcast. The next morning, I didn't say much. That night, she reached for me with this sudden, urgent affection. And I realized, she noticed the cold. And she was afraid of it. Not because it hurt her, but because it threatened the ecosystem she'd built. One where she could take without giving, as long as I kept filling the silence with hope. Then came the ring. She stopped wearing it one morning, no explanation. I noticed immediately but said nothing. 2 days passed before I brought it up, lightly. She glanced at her hand, shrugged, and said, "It's just jewelry now." Just jewelry. I nodded, took a sip of coffee, filed the phrase away like a clue in a long unsolved case. A week later, I noticed new faces in her feed. Not real friends, influencers. The kind that post quotes about soft living, radical detachment, being your own safe space. She started echoing them out loud. "It's not my job to make someone feel desired all the time," she said once, while brushing her hair. "People project their needs and call it love." I didn't argue. I just listened. I stopped offering rebuttals. Stopped trying to explain my heart like it was on trial. The last breadcrumb came by accident. She left an email open on the laptop. Mortgage pre-approval. Her name only. No conversation. No mention of it. No curiosity about how that might land. I stared at the screen for a long time, not angry. Not even surprised. Just resolved. She was planning to disappear. She just didn't know I already had. I didn't react. That was the entire point. No confrontation. No wounded monologue. I closed the laptop, put the kettle on, and asked if she wanted tea. She said sure, eyes still on her phone, and that was that. But something in me shifted that night. If she was already preparing her next chapter without me, then I owed it to myself to write the ending of this one on my terms. Not as the man left behind. Not as the one who begged for closeness and got clipped sarcasm in return. So I started the quiet work. It began with the finances. I wasn't flashy about it, just strategic. Shifted my direct deposit to a private account under a business pretext. Cancelled the auto transfer that fed our joint savings. She never checked statements anyway. Just assumed the pool would always be full. I rerouted my mail to a box near my office. Got a travel bag in the trunk with essentials. Nothing dramatic, just prepared to act quickly. I wanted resolution, separation, clear boundaries. But I did run one small test. A few days after seeing the mortgage email, I asked casually if she had any big financial goals coming up. She blinked for a moment, clearly debating whether to say anything. Then she said, "I've been thinking about investing in myself. Maybe some real estate. Solo. Just building my own future." She didn't say our. Not once. I nodded, as if I admired the ambition. But inside, the final wire snapped. She wasn't just disengaged. She was planning her escape under the banner of empowerment, while still using our life as scaffolding to get there. My income. My credit. My time. So I made one last move. I filed a declaration of non-responsibility with the lender she'd contacted. Quietly. Legally. Just enough to clarify I wouldn't be attached to any financial obligations under her name. It took a few hours. No confrontation needed. Just paperwork. The next 2 weeks passed like a strange dream. She acted normal. Cooked once or twice. Sent me those same empty memes. Talked about our someday plans like she hadn't already let them rot in her mouth weeks ago. And I smiled. Played along. But I slept lighter. Packed tighter. Answered less. When she left for a weekend retreat with a few friends, another self-discovery trip, I didn't go full scorched earth. I just left. Not forever. Just enough. Stopped staying at the house. Had the locks changed at my new place. Filed for mail forwarding. Dropped the key in the bowl by the door. There was no note. I wasn't trying to explain myself anymore. 2 weeks passed before she texted. "If this is about that night I laughed, I was joking. You're being kind of extreme." I stared at the screen. Thought about all the times I tried to explain what I needed. Then typed. "If I ever needed too much, it's because I thought we were building something worth needing." Then I blocked the number. Not out of spite. Out of peace. The silence must have panicked her. I didn't see it firsthand, but the fallout came in waves. First, a mutual friend messaged me, vague, neutral. "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay between you two?" I replied simply. "I think she's telling her version of things. I'm not going to compete with it." The friend didn't ask more. Just sent a thumbs up emoji, and that was that. Later, I heard she tried to close on the condo. She'd gone in confident, even celebratory. Dressed sharp, smiling like it was a formality. Then the lender asked for the updated income documentation, the joint account that had backed her pre-approval. When they saw I'd removed myself, when the declaration flagged my disassociation, it all unraveled. Her name alone wasn't enough. I wasn't there, but I can picture the look. The confusion that morphed into panic, and then something colder, realization. That I'd moved silently. That the scaffolding she thought was guaranteed had been pulled out from under her weeks ago. The deal collapsed. She tried to spin it, of course. I started hearing echoes through others. He ghosted me. He just checked out. I think he was intimidated by how independent I'd become. But no one really bought it. Not because I made my case, I didn't. But because people remembered. The eye rolls, the jokes. The way she dismissed me in front of them with a smirk. The performative distance she called strength. She didn't lose friends overnight. That's not how it works. They just stopped showing up. Fewer replies to her group texts. Plans that didn't include her. A subtle drift. Like a tide pulling back, slow but final. And me? I didn't celebrate. There's nothing satisfying about watching someone fall. even if they dug their own hole. But there was clarity. I saw the way people looked at me differently now. Not with pity, with quiet respect. Not because I'd exposed her. I hadn't. I didn't need to. I just stopped defending myself. Stopped explaining what she made small. Let the silence speak for itself. I moved out fully. Signed a lease. Cut the joint utilities. Sent a short, formal email about the car title and health insurance division. No emotion. Just logistics. That's what it had all become anyway. A business that no longer made sense to operate jointly. She didn't reply to any of it. I think that's when she finally understood. I hadn't just left. I'd erased my name from her future. In the weeks that followed, the quiet became sharper than anything she could have shouted. There were no late-night calls, no angry doorstep scenes. She wasn't that type. Her power had always lived in omission, in what she didn't say, didn't admit, didn't ask. But now, she had nothing to withhold that I hadn't already let go. I heard she started telling people she was focusing on herself, that the relationship had run its course. One person told me she'd said, "He just stopped being fun." That one made me laugh, not out loud, but in that tired way you laugh when someone misremembers the script they wrote. The truth is, I stopped playing the part she cast me in, the one where I was endlessly patient, endlessly giving, endlessly there. Without me in orbit, her narrative didn't hold. Meanwhile, I rebuilt, quietly, not out of anger, not even to prove anything, just to remember who I was before I started asking permission to matter. I hit the gym again, not for a transformation pose, but to feel my body take space without apology. I reconnected with people I'd slowly stopped calling, friends who noticed how much lighter my voice sounded, even when we weren't talking about her. One of them asked, "What really happened?" I told him the truth. She didn't cheat. She just made needing her feel embarrassing. He nodded, said nothing for a while, then offered, "That's worse." He was right. Most people expect betrayal to come with receipts, photos, messages, a dramatic lie. But what she did was subtler, more corrosive. She treated my vulnerability like background noise, something to be tolerated, not understood. Made affection feel like a transaction I hadn't earned enough credit to receive. And yet she still played house. Still said "love you" on autopilot. Still wore the mask, long after the performance had emptied out. There's something crueler about that, to pretend closeness while pulling away in every way that counts. I found myself remembering the first time I noticed it. A night years ago, when I had tried to talk about how disconnected I felt. She listened, then reached for me with practiced sympathy. We were quiet afterward. She looked satisfied, like a problem had been solved. But it hadn't. She had just learned how to give me just enough to keep from losing me completely. She never realized the cost of that strategy. I stopped asking. And once I stopped asking, the countdown had already begun. She thought she had time. She thought silence meant peace. But all it meant was that I'd made peace alone. Sometimes the deepest anger doesn't look like rage. It looks like distance, like silence that no longer tries to be understood. That's what I felt now, not fury, not grief. Just a sharp kind of detachment that came from finally seeing things clearly. She hadn't broken my heart. She drained it, slowly, quietly, until there was nothing left to respond with, then laughed when I said I was hungry. The irony is, I think she believed she was being honest with herself, that detaching was growth, that her retreat was about boundaries, not erosion. But in truth, she just stopped showing up and dressed it as evolution. I found a note in one of the drawers when I finally boxed the last of my things from the old house. It wasn't meant for me. It was a list, probably something she wrote during one of those influencer-driven manifestation phases. At the top, she'd written, "What I deserve." Below it, in bullet points, peace, freedom, unconditional love, no pressure, space to grow, safety without responsibility. I stared at the last one for a long time. Safety without responsibility. That's what she wanted. To be protected, adored, centered, but never obligated to give those things back. To receive effort without the inconvenience of reciprocity. To be cherished for who she was without having to confront how she'd stopped being someone worth cherishing. And the truth is, I tried. God, I tried. I spent years making excuses for her emotional absence, framing her avoidance as stress, timing, miscommunication. But at some point, silence stops being circumstantial. It becomes intentional. And once I saw that, really saw it, there was no anger left, just clarity. That's the part no one talks about. How freeing it is when you finally stop arguing with reality. When you stop trying to make your needs small enough to fit inside someone else's indifference. I didn't burn the note. I didn't even take it with me. I left it exactly where I found it, folded neatly, buried under a drawer organizer. Let her find it again someday and remember. Let her wonder if I saw it. Let the question linger. Not as revenge. As a mirror. Because sometimes the hardest truth to face isn't the one someone tells you. It's the one they stop trying to explain. I stopped checking her social media. Not out of strength, at first, but because it all looked the same. Motivational posts, photos angled just right, caption fragments about healing and boundaries, none of which hinted at the quiet decay behind her curated life. And yet people still messaged me, not to gossip, but to share fragments. She posted something about you being emotionally distant. Is it true you ghosted her after she opened up? I never responded with my side. I didn't correct the record. I didn't need to. People remember tone more than content. They remember how her jokes always cut just a little too deep, how she smirked when I looked uncomfortable, how her empathy had the shelf life of a punchline. Eventually, the questions stopped. People made their own conclusions. They always do. And I kept moving. There's something surreal about reclaiming your life without noise. I didn't go on a spree of declarations. No triumphant re-entry into the world. I just did the next right thing, quietly. Got my mornings back. Coffee without tension. Space without weight. I started lifting seriously again. At first, it was about control, putting force into something that pushed back honestly. But over time, it became something simpler, momentum. Each rep was a reminder that effort should feel earned, not extracted. Evenings got quieter, but less lonely. There was peace in solitude. Peace I hadn't felt in years, because I realized I'd been lonelier inside that relationship than I ever was outside of it. Loneliness isn't the absence of someone. It's the presence of someone who makes you feel small when you ask to be seen. One afternoon, I got a call from a mutual friend, someone who had stayed neutral through the split. He didn't mention her. Just invited me to something casual. A few people, backyard drinks. I went. Not to prove I was fine, but because I finally was. And that night someone asked how long it had been since we separated. I looked at the date, realized I hadn't been counting. That was the first sign I was healing. When the calendar stopped feeling like a tally of what I'd lost, and started becoming a record of everything I'd taken back. I ran into her once, accidental, brief. It was in a grocery store, of all places. The kind of mundane encounter that would have once triggered a tidal wave of emotion. But this time, it just felt muted. She saw me before I saw her. I caught it in a half-second of stillness, her spine straightening, the quick blink of calculation behind her expression. She didn't approach, didn't wave, just adjusted her posture like she wasn't surprised. I nodded once, civil, detached, then turned back to my cart. She didn't follow. She didn't call out. Later that day, I got a message. Not from her, from a mutual acquaintance. She said you looked cold, they told me. I didn't answer. What was there to say? I wasn't cold. I was finished. There's a difference. Cold is the armor you wear when you still care too much. Finished is what happens when you've given everything and feel nothing left to explain. It's easy for people like her to confuse the two. To believe a man's silence means he's hurting. That he's stewing, planning, grieving. The truth was simpler. I no longer saw her as someone I needed something from. Not closure. Not clarity. Not even accountability. There's a moment in every real ending where you stop wanting them to understand. You stop hoping they'll wake up one morning and finally see what they did. That moment had come and gone for me. The most she could offer now was silence, and honestly it suited us. But I did wonder, occasionally, how she explained it to herself, the absence, the fallout, the slowly evaporating social circle. How she justified the laughter, the eye rolls, the times she made my wants into something laughable. Did she feel regret? Or just inconvenience? I'll never know. And I no longer care. Because here's what I've learned. When someone teaches you to be embarrassed of your own needs, they're not offering strength, they're offering exile. A slow push out of the space where love once lived. But if you're lucky, if you're patient, that distance becomes clarity. And you start building something stronger in the space where shame used to sit. It wasn't just my world that changed. Over time, I noticed something shift in the way people responded to her too. Not overt, not dramatic. Just small changes in tone. Pauses where there used to be easy approval. A former mutual friend, someone who'd once laughed along with her, reached out one evening. I didn't expect it. We hadn't spoken since before everything slipped into silence. He didn't start with pleasantries. Just said, "Man, I didn't get it before. I do now." I waited. "She used to talk about you like you were this fragile thing. But you weren't fragile. You were asking for what she couldn't give." There was a pause. Then, "I think we all enabled her. That performative detachment. It's damaging if you don't realize when it stops being strength and starts being absence." I didn't say much. Just thanked him. But after the call ended, I sat with it for a long time. Not because I needed the validation. I'd stopped chasing that long ago, but because it confirmed something I hadn't dared assume. People had noticed. Maybe not at the time, but eventually. The patterns. The power dynamics. The jokes that didn't land. It was never about destroying her reputation. I never dragged her name. Never told anyone more than they asked for. But truth has a way of surfacing. Not through announcements, through atmosphere. And the atmosphere around her had changed. She still posted, still curated her image, still tried to own the narrative of self-actualization. But something about it rang hollow now. People responded less, smiled tighter. That's what happens when your empowerment comes at someone else's expense. Eventually, the room shifts. Not because anyone declared sides, but because dignity is magnetic, and silence speaks louder than spin. Meanwhile, I kept building. Got certified in something new. Not for a career change, just to remember what it felt like to learn for myself. I filled my weekends with purpose. Not distraction. Purpose. I started sleeping better. Not longer, just deeper. The kind of sleep you earn when you're no longer negotiating your worth in someone else's economy. And maybe most telling of all, I stopped rehearsing old conversations in my head. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed to be right. Being free was enough. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like stillness. Like waking up one morning and realizing the first thought in your head wasn't about how to keep the peace. Not scanning tone. Not anticipating reactions. Just starting the day. Existing without strategy. There's a strange kind of grief in that too. Not for her. That part had already burned down. But for the version of me who spent so long trying to make a one-sided love feel mutual. Who thought that being consistent, being patient, being open would eventually be reciprocated. He wasn't weak. Just loyal to the wrong version of the story. I don't resent him. I just buried him with honor and moved forward. One night, months after I'd left, I got a voicemail. Not from her, from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. A mutual contact. They sounded unsure of why they were calling, like the message had been weighing on them for a while. "She says you disappeared. That you abandoned her after she opened up." A pause. I used to believe her. But then I remembered, she never opened up to anyone. Just dressed up her distance in cute captions. And you were the only one who ever tried to meet her halfway. There was no request at the end. No call back. Just silence after the last sentence. That told me everything. The truth has weight. Eventually it tips the scales. She might still tell herself that I was the one who left, that I just couldn't handle her. Boundaries. But in her quiet moments, the ones no one sees, I know she feels the absence, not just of me, but of the safety I gave her without a second thought. And the irony? She thought power came from withholding, from control, from not needing. But the real power came from me walking away with nothing, and still being whole, still being kind, still being myself, because I never stopped being who I was. I just stopped handing it to someone who couldn't hold it. By the time autumn came, she was a ghost in every room we'd once shared. Her voice didn't echo in my new space. Her scent wasn't clinging to old furniture. Even the songs she used to play on repeat stopped catching my ear. The life I'd built with her had become a life I no longer reached for. And I wasn't replacing her. I was replacing need. I'd started spending more time with people who actually asked how I was doing, and waited for the answer. Who didn't treat emotion like a weak currency. Who laughed without a note of derision. People who gave warmth without strings. It was slow. Careful. I didn't rush into anyone's arms. I wasn't looking for new love. Just new soil. Somewhere stable enough to plant something honest in. Even if it was just myself. I ran into one of her former friends during a late-night coffee stop. We talked politely. They didn't bring her up until the end. She says she's happy for you. That you're doing better. I nodded, let it sit. Then they said something that stuck. She doesn't understand how you bounce back so quickly. That was the part she never got. It wasn't quick. It was a long, quiet war, fought in the dark, with myself, with hope, with disappointment. With every moment I bit my tongue instead of saying, "This isn't working for me." So by the time I walked away, I wasn't fleeing. I was just walking home. And no, I didn't crash. Didn't spiral. Didn't beg. Because I'd already lost the real battle years before, the one where I kept trying to get her to care the way I cared. And once I stopped fighting that, everything else got simpler. I built a life she has no map to. She can't follow me here, not because I blocked her path, but because the version of me that tolerated mockery, withheld affection, and false closeness, he's gone. She laughed when I asked for warmth, mocked my hunger, made my needs into a punchline. So now I live a life where I don't have to explain those needs anymore. They're understood, or they're not invited.